welcome back to the channel. Now some news for my American viewers, and it's not good news, I'm afraid, because the FAA has just announced a proposed rule that's really going to make the hobby very, very difficult, very restrictive, because it's all to do with drone identification. Remember, in the eyes of the regulators, anything that flies and is remotely controlled is a drone. That includes our RC models, whether they be helicopters, gas-powered models, turbine-powered models, electric gliders. Everything that flies remotely controlled is a drone, or a UAS, unmanned aerial system. And the FAA has decided it's time to make some changes. And they're proposing, remember this is just a proposal, it's not a rule yet, and there is a 60-day consultation period where people like you get to have your say. Whether you'll be listened to is another story. I don't know that they will listen to you, but this is what they have planned. What they want to do is have electronic conspicuity, or electronic ID, on every drone, model aircraft, whatever. And this comes in two forms. There are two levels of this electronic conspicuity. The two categories are what they call standard and limited. Now, standard means that you're going to have a transponder on your model. It'll be broadcasting its identification and its location. So it'll be latitude, longitude, altitude, all that sort of stuff, so that any other passing craft can pick that up, or any law enforcement officer can pick it up with an app or whatever. However they do it, it means your drone, your model, will be broadcasting its ID and its position to anyone within listening distance. They don't specify anything to do with the technology, what that listening distance might be, whether it be a few hundred meters or whether it be miles and miles. It's not stated, because this is just the initial draft proposal of the rule. So that would mean obviously adding some electronics, a radio transmitter of some kind. Now there are some proposed standards out there that are based on Wi-Fi, and that, okay, you're running 2.4 gig radio in your model. Do you really want a 2.4 gig Wi-Fi transmitter right alongside your receiver? I don't know that's such a good idea, to be totally honest, but that's what the proposal is. Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, I think, were the options stated there. So that means your model will be broadcasting its position and ID, plus you will have had to also connect that to the internet in some way, shape or form, so that the data is available through the internet to a central control system and an unmanned traffic management system that will then log the position of your aircraft and enable flight controllers or an automated system to basically ensure that there's no conflict. There's not going to be a chance of your drone hitting another drone, or your drone hitting a full-size aircraft. So this is all in the future. They're going to have these UTMs, and it's big business. There's going to be billions of dollars spent on UTMs. There's also going to be many, many dollars to be made out of selling these transponders. And that's one of the reasons this is all happening. It's all about the money. Anyway, so that's the standard category. So you need an internet connection, and you'll need a transmitter that broadcasts to everything in the local area. The other category is what they call limited. And I think this is a little bit like the Lance system now, where you're going to have to go online and through the internet tell people, hey, I'm here and I'm flying. And who are you? So it'll be ID and location, and that'll go through the internet. So you have to get your app out and, like they do with Lance, get approval to fly there. There are some problems with this one though. Under the limited category, it says you've got to broadcast through the net, but you will be restricted significantly. You will not be able to fly more than 400 feet from the control point, which is where you stand with your transmitter. So you'll only be able to fly 133 yards away. Seriously, 133 yards. That's as far as you'll be allowed to fly from your launch point, or from the point where you're standing, if you don't have the full system that has an onboard beacon or transponder to broadcast the signal live. How many of us who fly RC models stay within 133 yards of ourselves once we take off? I don't think, well, I don't. Generally speaking, I fly, several hundred yards away. A fast model, you need to do, runs up and down. You're going to be traveling quite a distance. If you're flying even line of sight, you want to do aerobatics and stuff like that. You don't fly right there in front of you. And if you're confining all the models to within a 400-foot radius, then there's the potential for mid-air collisions. In fact, there's a greatly increased potential for mid-air collisions, because you're concentrating all that activity in a small space. Now, there are going to be some exemptions, although they say that all UAS operators will be required to comply regardless of whether they conduct recreational or commercial operations, as long as your craft qualifies for registration, which means it's 250 grams or more. Then you're going to have comply with either the standard or the limited electronic ID, unless there is an exemption they're going to say here, which is for non-compliant and amateur-built craft. They say those craft flying without remote ID would only be allowed to fly at certain specific geographical areas established to specifically accommodate them. So that's your AMA flying field, basically. If you want to fly a model without a transponder on it and you don't want to have to go online and report the fact that you're flying somewhere in a certain position through Lance, you're going to be stuck in a little grassy field in the middle of nowhere. No flying in the park, no flying in the local school grounds, no flying in bandos, no flying anywhere except the designated areas, which will be few and far between, and almost certainly none of them will be in an urban or a suburban environment. They'll be way out in the boonies. And the interesting thing is that because you need to have internet connectivity for both the standard and the limited category of flying under this new proposed rule, you can't fly way out beyond cell phone coverage or beyond internet coverage. If you get out into the middle of nowhere, find a beautiful flying site where there's nobody around, so there's no one to get injured, there's no property, it's just grass or hills or tussock or something, and there's no manned aircraft, if you cannot get an internet connection, you cannot fly. Because even if you've got the onboard transponder, you still need to be transferring that data through the internet to the UTM. And if you are just choosing to use the limited operation where you're going to stay within 133 yards, you still have to log your flight through the internet, which means having cell phone coverage. Unless there is a internet cafe in the middle of nowhere, which I strongly doubt. So this is a bit flawed. They're basically saying you can't fly in the safe place, miles from anywhere, well away from everybody. You've got to fly in an area where there's mobile phone coverage, which is going to be more likely to have people and property that could potentially be at risk when you fly your models. They haven't thought this through. This is typical of bureaucrats sitting behind a desk thinking they've got all the answers, but they have no practical experience. They obviously haven't thought about this at all. And I'll get onto that in a moment, why they haven't thought about it at all. And then we come to the justification, the reason, the raison d'etre for this rule. Why are they introducing all these restrictions? Why are they making it only possible to fly over a little grassy field at a designated flying site if you're not going to have these transponders on your model? Why is that? Well, let me read what the FAA claim. This is their claimed justification. They say the remote identification of UAS is necessary to ensure public safety and the safety and efficiency of the airspace of the United States. That is utter bullshit. Now, I don't use profanity often, but this deserves some profanity. It's bullshit. Show me the bodies. FAA, show me the bodies. Where's the danger? You're saying public safety. Now, how many members of the public have been killed through the recreational use of multi-rotor drones or even model aircraft? How many people are killed every year by model aircraft? I know there have been a few fatalities over the years, but you're talking about the fingers on one hand over many, many, many decades of safe flying. You compare that to the number of people that die in general aviation incidents every year. Surely you have better things to be focused on. If public safety is the important thing, why aren't you focusing on the things that kill people? That is, people with general aviation licenses who fly too low or who otherwise break the rules and kill themselves and other people. Why aren't you focused on Boeing, whose 737 MAX 8 has accounted for how many deaths? Seriously? You're telling us you have to put all these rules in place to protect the safety of the airspace and public safety, yet you're basically doing nothing. Nothing. You're allowing Boeing to self-certify with disastrous results. Come on, focus on the real problem. Stop bullshitting us. Now, of course, they're saying it's only a matter of time before a drone collides with a manned aircraft, but let me have a look. I did some research a while ago on how many people are killed every year as a result of collisions between manned aircraft. Not manned aircraft and drones, but manned aircraft and other manned aircraft. Now, I think I saw a figure this morning. There are over 1.5 million drones in the USA. But not one person has been killed as a result of any of those drones colliding with a manned aircraft. Meanwhile, it is a very regular occurrence for manned aircraft to crash into each other and kill people. So why aren't you focused on making manned aviation safer instead of worrying about problems that don't exist, which is the risk of a drone colliding with a manned aircraft? Even on the very, very few instances where manned aircraft and drones have collided, the damage has been minimal. There have not even been injuries, let alone deaths. So you are telling this big lie about this is essential to ensure public safety and the safety and efficiency of the airspace. It is a lie. You've been caught out telling lies. Now, if I am wrong, and I'm always willing to admit sometimes I get things wrong, but if I'm wrong, then I challenge the FAA right now. FAA, I'm pretty sure you're going to be watching this video because hopefully it's going to be popular and people will be asking questions. I'm asking you now, FAA, send me a copy of the comprehensive risk assessment you have done to justify this proposed rule. If you can do that, I will humbly apologise for doubting you. If you can't do that, then you shouldn't be making any claims in respect to safety. Risk assessments are an essential part of any rulemaking. You've got to come up with an adequate understanding and quantification of the risks before you make a rule. Otherwise, you end up cracking a walnut with a sledgehammer, or you don't pass rules that are rigid enough. At the moment, we've had many tens of decades, many decades, probably over 100 years of model flying. And the death toll from that is absolutely minimal. So I don't see the evidence to back up your claims that this is necessary to ensure public safety and the safety and efficiency of the airspace of the United States. There is just no evidence to support it. If you've got evidence to prove to the contrary, then send it to me and I will share it with all my viewers. And they will see for themselves that I was wrong and you were right. But I don't think that's going to happen, is it? And if you don't do anything, if you don't contact me, you don't say a thing, well, we can read between the lines. Sometimes silence speaks far louder than words. So FAA, send me your information. Show me the comprehensive risk assessment. If not, withdraw this lunatic rule or realise that the hobby is not the problem. We've been flying our models safely for decades and do not burden us with the responsibility that shouldn't be burdened on us. We have done nothing. Don't try and penalise us, because this is a penalty. This will kill the hobby. This will kill the hobby. If we have to go back to the way it was in the 1950s and simply fly around grassy fields in the middle of nowhere as a privilege, then I'm sorry, that the hobby will die. It will die because the most exciting, the most vibrant, the most dynamic parts of the hobby are the new parts. The parts that involve flying FPV mini-quads in abandoned buildings, around parks quite safely, in areas well below the 400 feet maximum. Most people flying mini-quads they're below the treetops. They're inside buildings, flying through windows and doors in abandoned structures. They are no threat to the safety or efficiency of the airspace of the United States. But under your proposed rule, they may not even be able to fly there, and if they do, they're going to have to stay within a very narrow distance, and they'll have to have a transponder on their model. No, this is lunacy. And to show how much more lunacy is involved, there is a lot of talk in this proposed rule about integrating UAS into the national airspace. That is exactly the wrong thing to do for model flies. You do not want to integrate model flies into the national airspace. They shouldn't be in the navigable airspace of the United States. They should be flying in their own, sub 400. Now remember, GA aircraft, if you want to make this safer, if you want to make the skies in America safer, make a new rule by all means, but make it that manned aircraft may not descend below 1,000 feet except when taking off or landing at designated areas set aside for doing so. They're called airports and helipads. If you do that, you increase the separation between UAS and manned aircraft by another 600 feet. That will add a huge amount of safety. If it's about safety, you be pragmatic. Don't just be thinking, oh, we've got these new, these drones, they're easy pickings, because there are a lot more of us than there are manned aviators now. There are 1.5 million drones in the USA. There are hundreds of thousands of people who fly drones. How many manned aircraft are there in the USA? How many people are there in the USA with pilot's licenses? I think you'll find that they're now in the minority. You have to cater to the needs of the majority, and the hobby is the majority. In the USA, people pay their registration. They need to get something for that other than just punitive restrictions, as this rule would appear to be. And then there is the utter lunacy. Now, under the regulations, unmanned aircraft must always give way to manned aircraft. That's the rule. That's the rule. It is not the responsibility of a manned aviator to move out of the way of a drone or a model aircraft. It's the responsibility of the drone operator or the model flight to move out of the way of the manned aircraft, even if that manned aircraft is flying too low. and the model flyer is flying quite legally at maybe a couple hundred feet. And there are so many reports now. I get emails all the time from people saying, we were flying at our local field and a plane came through so low I could read the writing on the tyres. That's the kind of thing that's happening in manned aviation. Some of them think the rules don't apply to them. Yet, if one of those planes was to hit a drone or a model aircraft, the burden of liability would fall on the model flyer, because the model flyer must always give way to manned aviation, even if the manned aviator is breaking the rules. So now we have this lunatic situation. If this proposed rule goes ahead, then all drones will have to have electronic conspicuity. They'll have to have electronic ID system on them, a transponder. Not just drones that might be flown in controlled airspace, but drones everywhere. Even in Class G airspace, your drone will need a transponder. Yet the irony is that the manned aircraft will not need a transponder in Class G airspace. Yes, if you're in controlled airspace, you have to have ADS-B fitted, but if you're in uncontrolled airspace, I don't believe there's any legal requirement to have a transponder. But if you think about it, if the model flyers have to give way to the manned aviators, they need to know the manned aviators are coming. So it should be the manned aircraft that have the transponders all the time, even in Class G, because we need to know they are coming so we can move out of the way. A transponder on a drone will not tell us that there's a manned aircraft coming, yet the burden of giving way falls on our shoulders. So before you start making rules that says all these drones must have transponders or electronic IDs, how about you make it so that all manned aircraft operating in all categories of airspace must have ADS-B? Because that's what will make things safer. We cannot move out of the way if we do not know they're coming. And us having a transponder doesn't change the burden of responsibility. It's still our responsibility to move out of the way. So let's not be punitive. This is purely punitive. And you're talking about this integration. No, it's not the way to make things safe. I use this analogy quite often. We have cars and we have pedestrians. Now, we don't try and integrate pedestrian traffic onto the freeway. We don't paint little lines on the freeway where pedestrians can walk amongst the cars. No, we don't do that, because that would be lunacy, much like this new rule. You say the only safe way to ensure that people and cars don't hit each other is to put the people in one area, we call it a sidewalk, and we put the cars in another area. It's called the freeway. And you're not allowed to walk on the freeway. If you do, you get your ass kicked. Or in America, you get your ass kicked. And if you drive your car on the sidewalk, you get your ass kicked. And that's the way the airspace should stay. We have manned aircraft, keep them up there at 1,000 feet, well out of the way, on their freeway, up at 1,000 feet and above. That's a lot of room for manned aircraft. 1,000 feet and above, huge amount of space. And let's keep the unmanned aircraft down there 400 feet and below. 600 feet of vertical separation, that is a lot of space. And by doing that, you don't integrate the pedestrians into the freeway traffic, you keep them separate like we do with vehicles. Now that's proven to be very successful. There are not a lot of deaths of pedestrians on freeways. And if there are, well, they shouldn't have been there. And we don't get a lot of deaths from cars knocking people down on sidewalks because they shouldn't be there. Let's do the same with the airspace. It's not rocket science, FAA. If you cannot see this, if you're hell-bent on integrating, mixing the two, having people wandering around in the middle of a freeway, then your claim that this is to ensure public safety and the safety and efficiency of the airspace of the United States is again bullshit, isn't it? So as a community of model flyers and drone operators, what are we going to do about this? Now, as I said, this is just a proposed rule at this stage, although I have come to learn that proposed rules, generally speaking, they become a rule, because although there's a consultative period of 60 days and they're legally required to consult with the public, they're not legally required to listen. This happens right through bureaucracy. I've seen it at all levels, from town councils through to national governments, through to bureaucracies. They consult, but they do not listen. They'll do what they want to do. So we need to bring some extra weight to bear on the decision-making process, and I think I know how to do that. I'm going to do another video shortly when I'll explain what I think would be the best strategy for countering this rule, for making sure this rule does not go ahead in a way that punitively penalises the hobby. Yeah, sure, commercial operators, make them have electronic conspicuity, make them do whatever you like, but for hobbyists, the safest flyers on the planet, don't burden them with the responsibilities that should not fairly be put on their shoulders. And so I'm going to tell you how we do that, how we leverage our assets to maximum effect. And we don't have to go in there battling. Of course, we can all send in emails during the consultative period. And if there are, as they say, hundreds of thousands, we've got 200,000 AMA members, we've got hundreds of thousands of other people with drones who'll all be affected. We could have a small effect, but it's not going to have the necessary effect, because they can ignore every single one of those emails and all of those written letters and submissions. However, there's one thing they can't ignore, and I'll tell you what that is in the next video I do on this subject. And we'll just have to box smart. And I think I have a strategy that will pay huge dividends. So stick with me on that. But in the meantime, what I'd like you to do is to spread word of this video. Link it on your book face and on your Insta diddly or whatever you've got, all your social media. Point to this video so people come here and they see it and comment on this video. I want to hear from you. I've got ideas, but hey, my ideas aren't always the best. They aren't always the only ones. So I'd like to hear back from you people. If we don't do this, we're going to be so marginalized that this hobby, as we know it, will cease to exist. At least the best parts of this hobby. If you're happy to sit around on a Sunday afternoon in the twilight of your life and fly in circles over a grassy paddock, you'll be okay. But if you want to enjoy the hobby as it has become, if you want to do FPV, if you want to fly bandos, if you want to, take advantage of all the new technologies, I'm sorry, this is going to kill it for you. So, yeah, and don't rely on the AMA. The AMA have proved, I've got nothing against the AMA. People say, oh, you hate the AMA. No, I don't. I think they do some fantastic stuff. I watch their YouTube videos, their monthly or bi-monthly YouTube video. I love it. It's great. And they do some fantastic stuff to support the hobby. But when it comes to interfacing with bureaucracy, they are useless. I'm sorry, I've got to be honest. Look at what they did in respect to the repealing of Section 336. They were completely ineffectual because they made the mistake of thinking, we're working with the FAA. No, you were not working with the FAA. The FAA was working with itself, and they told you what you wanted to hear right up until the moment that 336 was rescinded, because the FAA is looking out for the FAA. They're not looking out for you. They're not looking, that doesn't matter what they tell you. Their sole responsibility, their sole goal is to do what's best for the FAA and those who lobby the FAA. You guys, you don't count for anything. You're a bunch of grown old men with toys. You don't count for anything. We've got to bring in the big guns on this one. So sure, AMA, go for it. Do all the lobbying you can, get there, but don't rely on the AMA. If you do, it'll be just like Section 336. We'll be done for, we'll be toast. So we've got to bring in far more savvy, more clever, savvy, thinking outside the box. And I think I have a few strategies for that, but there's only 60 days in which to operate. So this has to be done very quickly, and we need the weight of numbers to do it. So whether you're a US citizen or whether you're from outside the USA, it still affects you for a number of reasons. If you're not a US citizen, if you live in another country, be aware that where the US goes, most other countries eventually follow. So this will, as registration did, they brought it in the USA and then it spread around the world. Same will happen here. Compulsory electronic ID, the restriction of traditional model flying to allocated areas. This will all happen around the world unless we nip it in the bud now. So I want everybody around the world to be involved in this, to be aware of what's happening and to be aware of the strategies that need to be used to avoid this becoming a real rule. There you go. Now, I'm a bit of an activist, a bit of an old hippie, and I'm doing my best to represent the hobby in this in a way that will get us what we should have, which is our continued rights to fly, and which is being taken from us by the FAA, or they're trying to. So there you go. To the comments with you. Want to hear your feedback. Spread word of this video. Link it everywhere. Link to this video everywhere you can. And get the discussion rolling at your club this weekend. If you go to the club, talk about this. Point out what's happening. Say, do you really want to be confined to a grassy field in the middle of nowhere? Or do you really want to have to add the cost of electronic conspicuity to all your models? Do you really want to be confined to flying within a 130-yard radius of where you're standing? These things, they're going to cripple us. They really are. Anyway, it's enough from me. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Thumbs up if you like it. Thumbs down if you don't. Comment on it and spread the word. If you'd like to support the channel, there are links in the description. Go and have a look. You don't have to. It's not obligatory. I do this for the benefit of the hobby, not for the benefit of my wallet. Thanks for watching, guys. See you again soon. Bye for now.